been a who's who of VP contenders that are going to be tuning in together at a debate watch party in Atlanta. That includes my next guest, one of Trump's top contenders to be his vice president, Republican governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum. And Doug, Governor, it's great to have you here. Obviously, this debate is going to be huge. It's in 4 days from now. How critical do you believe it is for Donald Trump to have a strong performance?
Well, I think it's something that America is very excited to look forward to, and I'm sure it's going to be a very good debate. And congratulations to CNN for having this historic debate. But I think, again, there has been a real effort on the Biden team to try to lower expectations. But I think we have to look at the guy's run for office more than a dozen times. He's run for president 4 times. He's been campaigning since President Nixon was in office. This guy has got the ability, and we've seen it. We've seen him in debate 4 years ago. We've seen him in the State of the Union this year. That when he needs to, he can step up. But I think this is a real opportunity for CNN, most trusted name in news, to ask some tough questions, including, because this is a rematch. And when we had this debate just before the election 4 years ago, Joe Biden looked into the camera and said, that Hunter Biden's laptop was a smear campaign, Russian disinformation, called it garbage. And now we know that none of that is true. And I think this is an opportunity. I think America's waiting. I mean, CNN's got an opportunity to ask tough questions of both these candidates.
Yeah, I think safe to say there'll be tough questions for everybody. But it's interesting that you say Biden is lowering expectations, because Trump has also been doing that. You yourself have called Biden infirm. I mean, you have been setting the bar pretty low for President Biden. Is that a mistake?
Well, I don't know if it's a mistake or not. I mean, I think I think America sort of looks at the state of the state. He stood up and he spoke strongly for over an hour. And then when we're with a group of governors with him back in February, we were limited to 2 questions. One Republican governor and one Democrat each got to ask a question. 40 governors, we get 2 questions with the president. Questions had to be submitted 2 days in advance. That's a far cry from standing in a debate for 90 minutes. So I think we're all anxious to see which Joe Biden is going to show up.
But you think that Biden will be formidable?
Well, I think he really knows how to do this. And like I said, he convinced America that laptop was fake so strongly at that last debate that then the news agencies and social media then started shutting down even the ability to post about that story. And if he was that good about lying about that 4 years ago, I guess the question would be, when did he know that the laptop was real, and what might he do this time that would convince the American people?
He was citing that letter from the intelligence officials. I mean, we've asked them about that since, and obviously the whole issue with social media was before the debate. But I want to ask you about something that you've been saying repeatedly about President Biden. Take a listen to this.
Talk about being a dictatorship. This is what's happening under Biden. Under Joe Biden, we're actually living under a dictatorship today. If you want to find out what it's like to live in a dictatorship, we're living in one now. So we know what it's like under dictatorship, and that dictatorship right now is Joe Biden.
I understand you don't like President Biden's policies on immigration or student loans, but respectfully, I mean, you're calling the democratically elected president a dictator?
Well, we've got 3 branches of government, and this president, more like any other, has bypassed Congress, because as a governor of a natural resources state and a big ag state, we're facing over 30 rules and mandates. Each one of those could be 800 pages to 1,400 pages long. None of them have come from Congress, and all of them could literally kill the industries that we have in our state, including baseload electricity, which we need to be competitive in the arms race around AI with China, who's building baseload electricity plants like 2 a month. So that's happening without Congress. And then, of course, on the student loan thing, when the Supreme Court ruled against him, then he just said, hey, we'll figure a different way to do it. So I just think that there's, again, a double standard here. He is bypassing the other 2 branches of government to push an ideological view, whether it's on economics or whether it's on climate extremism. He's doing that without using the other branches. And
you don't like his executive orders, and you don't like his policies. I understand that. I don't think anyone expects the Republican governor to agree with President Biden on that. But it's not a dictatorship.
Well, I think, again, part of where this word has come from there's been a nonstop media attack on President Trump, saying that he might use executive orders when he takes office. And was trying to make the point here that under this current administration, most of the changes that are driving inflation in our country, The stuff he's not doing on the border, which he could be doing with executive orders. I mean, the open borders and the inflation are things that he's doing by himself alone, ignoring the other branches of government.
Well, I counted. Trump signed 220 executive orders when he was in office. President Biden so far has only signed 139, the same time span. And on executive action on immigration, it was Speaker Mike Johnson who was calling on President Biden to take executive action, saying it wasn't Congress's responsibility, it was his. But let me move on, because as I mentioned, you are one of Donald Trump's top contenders to be vice president. I've heard from sources that really they believe it's down to you and to Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. Of course, the caveat, Trump could change his mind. But when you look at the ticket and we look at vice presidential selections in the past, Joe Biden helped Barack Obama with foreign policy inexperience. Mike Pence helped Donald Trump with evangelicals. Kamala Harris, black voters, women voters for President Biden. What would you bring to a Trump ticket specifically?
Well, I think we have to just look at the fact that President Trump can win this race regardless of who his vice president is. He's got the luxury of not having to pick someone. And I think if we actually look in political history, the last time a vice presidential pick actually helped swing an election was when Kennedy picked Lyndon Johnson, and Lyndon Johnson helped Kennedy win that race. And with President Trump right now, where he is with Hispanics, with blacks, with people under age 30, and with independents, I mean, he's very strong across the board. So he can pick someone that he can focus on, like, hey, let's get someone, get stuff done. Let's get someone who helps him govern. He doesn't have to make a choice like some of the others names that you cited, where maybe they needed a blend to actually get the electoral block.
But what would you bring to the ticket specifically if you're on it? Would it be your business experience? You talked about governing. What is it specifically? Why should he pick you, basically?
Well, I think that's up to President Trump. President Trump understands the criteria that he wants. He's going to make that choice at the time he makes it. He's got a lot of great choices, and I think everybody, the whole country maybe knows my background, which is both success in business and success as in the executive branch as governing. But that's his choice on what criteria that he wants. And again, when we've got this big week and the big debate going this week, nobody's really thinking about the VP thing this week. And we should really be focusing on, how is Joe Biden going to defend his record on an open border? I mean, we take a look at what's happening in our country with the migrant crime that's happening, whether it's teenage girls, whether it's mother of five, or whether it's young college-age women. We've got an issue with an open border, and Joe Biden needs to answer why he keeps insisting on having this open border policy.
You're one of Trump's busiest surrogates. I mean, you make arguments like that right there multiple times on cable news. Obviously, you do a lot of the Sunday shows. You're here today. Do you think that you're best positioned to serve on his ticket?
I think that question is up to President Trump. What we decided when we decided.
But if he's watching right now, what's your argument to him, I guess, for why you would be a good choice?
Well, that could be if that's a conversation between President Trump and myself. But I think right now I'm doing what I think that everybody that cares about the future of this country should be doing, which is understanding that if you care about inflation, which is hurting income producing low-income people the most, because it's affecting food, the price of energy, the price of electricity. The American dream is being killed by high interest rates. Housing costs have gone up by over 30%. If you care about that stuff, then you should be out campaigning for President Trump. And there is no expectation that Catherine and I have on this thing about some job in the administration or anything else. We're doing this because I know that our state of North Dakota can't take 4 more years of Joe Biden, and that translates to the rest of the country.
Yeah, and that's the First Lady of North Dakota that you're referring to there. Have you said that conversation is between the two of you? Have you had that conversation with President Trump?
That process is up to President Trump, and that's where that conversation should stay.
The other, if you are selected to be on the ticket, would you be willing to go into your own personal wealth to help fund the campaign like you did with your presidential run?
Again, I think all of that is, if we're asked, we'll see what happens. But right now, there's something that's, I think that everybody knows. Anybody that's out there knocking on doors, volunteering and making phone calls like the people I've met in Michigan and Minnesota and Virginia and North Carolina and Nevada, there's something more important than writing a check. There's people that are actually out there talking to their neighbors and saying, here's why I'm supporting President Trump. They're giving of their time. That's their irrevocable gift that they're doing. And we've been giving a lot of our time the last 6 months. And I think that's what we're seeing. The energy we see on the ground is people that maybe don't have a dime to give. They don't have $10 to give, but some of these people are donating to President Trump, which is terrific, but they're also giving out and volunteering their time. And that's how this race is. This race is going to be won and lost House by the energy of the voters.
Yeah,
and
we've
they
watched
see,
the numbers
Yes.
and seen that, especially the fundraising. We've been tracking that. But you mentioned any other jobs. If you're not offered the vice presidential selection, would you accept a cabinet position?
Again, that's a conversation with the president, but right now I think I've been clearly clear with everybody along. I was a private sector guy. I was in the private sector up until the day that President Trump got elected. We got elected on the same night back in November of 2016. And there's lots of ways in the private sector that you can have an impact to move this country forward, particularly with AI right now, because there's an opportunity for us to take 20% of the cost out of government across the whole nation, but only if we've got the power base to run AI. We're killing our electrical base at a time when we're in arms race with China. And if the future of our country, the future of our economy depends on us being great at innovation. Innovation greatness has always driven our country forward.
Yeah.
And now we're at risk of destroying that because of the climate extremists that want to shut down our power grid in America.
Okay, that sounds like a no to a cabinet position, but we'll see how this plays out. Governor, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining us here on
Thank
ZEP.
you, Caitlin.